Hello, I am Mary Baunjoko, and I am presenting this action research study as a requirement for the capstone course EDU626 at Georgetown College. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. In the classroom, educators have opportunities to change the lives of students. This is especially important for students at high poverty, urban schools who, if given a chance, can use the power of education to transform their lives. This is why it is important that educators can effectively identify gifted students that are traditionally overlooked in gifted programs, which include minority students, low socioeconomic students, English language learners, and twice exceptional students. The study of this action study, Big Elementary in Louisville, Kentucky, is a school where every student falls into one or more of these aforementioned categories. Identifying gifted students at this school can be challenging, but is imperative to improving the school's overall academic achievement. Empowering teachers with the proper tools to effectively identify gifted students is an important initial step. Researched previous studies related to underrepresented groups in gifted programs. The three themes used to guide this action study were teachers' perceptions about identifying giftedness, gifted identification of underrepresented groups, and characteristics of underrepresented gifted groups. Several studies examined the theme of teachers' perception about what are the characteristics of gifted students. The research suggests that teachers seem to rely more on tools such as standardized testing to identify giftedness. This contrasts with the theme of identifying gifted students of underrepresented groups, where the research concludes that gifted identification procedures should include other factors than standardized testing when identifying students of underrepresented groups. The final theme focuses on the academic and affective profiles of underrepresented groups in gifted programs. The methodology for this action study. For this, I chose an explanatory mixed method design. This approach would explore the narrative behind the numbers when it comes to teachers' perception of how effective they feel they are in identifying giftedness in the study's setting, where the majority of students are African American and or low SES, and a significant number of our students are in the school's ELL and ECE programs. The quantitative data comes from two surveys, one before presenting and identifying giftedness PD, and the other one after the PD. The qualitative data is from structured interviews with each of the participants. Because implicit bias can contribute to the teacher's perception about who can be identified as gifted, I felt it necessary to pull a diverse group of students. The participants for this action study vary in race and gender, grade level and or subject taught, and teacher experience. Table 2 shows that participants' teaching experience varies from 1.5 years to 19 years. By race and gender. 4 of the participants are white females, 5 are African American females, and 1 is an African American male. Figure 2 shows the grade level and subject taught by each of the participants. There are 6 kindergarten through 5th grade teachers, 1 representing each grade level. There is also 3 special area teachers and 1 ELL teacher in this study. To prepare for this action study, I first received consent from all the participants. Next, I sent out the first gifted identification survey via email to all the participants. I conducted an online giftedness identification PD after receiving the completed first set of surveys. I also conducted structured interviews with each of the participants. Each interview was recorded on my personal iPhone and transcribed using the Transcribe app. Finally, I emailed the post-PD survey to each participant. Once I completed all interviews and received the pre- and post-PD surveys, I coded all of the collected data, specifically looking for recurring themes. The recurring themes were then analyzed to determine any connection to the research question. I then connected the peer-reviewed literature search to the themes found in the action study. This allowed me to triangulate my data. Table 3 shows the results of the pre-gifted PD survey. Although the results vary based on the specific types of giftedness, most teachers believe they are able to identify a gifted student in their classroom. Table 3 continues to show that although teachers feel that they can effectively identify gifted students at Big Elementary, teachers at Big Elementary would benefit from having a gifted identification checklist and more gifted identification PDs. This table also shows that teachers believe that standardized testing should not be a big factor in identifying giftedness. Gifted PD. And those results did not change. Although most teachers feel confident in identifying gifted students, teachers still should have a gifted checklist and PD, especially new teachers and teachers that teach non-academic subjects such as special areas. In Table 5, this shows the coding theme that came out of analyzing the structured teacher interviews. I started with the initial themes, then refined those themes by looking for recurring themes from all 10 interviews. The common themes include: gifted students are creative problem solvers. Gifted education should not rely heavily on standardized testing when identifying gifted students in underrepresented groups. Teacher-student relationship is an important factor in identifying gifted students in underrepresented groups. Table 6 shows the meta-themes that came out of all the data sources, and this includes: most teachers feel that they can effectively identify gifted students because the characteristics they are able to observe in underrepresented gifted groups. A gifted checklist would help teachers identify students so that the identification process would not rely too heavily on standardized testing. Gifted PD would allow teachers to effectively identify students and combat teacher bias and the inexperience of new teachers when identifying gifted students. During the interview, the participants shared their ideas and suggestions for what could help teachers identify underrepresented gifted groups. These suggestions for future practices include: school-specific gifted checklist. This would be beneficial to teachers, especially new or special area teachers that may not be familiar with the characteristics of gifted students. Teachers also recommend that our school invest in providing teachers with more gifted identification development opportunities, especially related to identifying students that are underrepresented in gifted programs. Incorporating positive teacher-student relationship strategies. This would not only help teachers identify gifted students, but would positively increase the school's overall culture and climate. Research study was to determine if having giftedness identification protocol would affect teachers' perception about identifying gifted students in underrepresented gifted groups. After collecting and analyzing data from 3 different sources, it is concluded that although participants believe they could effectively identify gifted students, a school-specific giftedness identification protocol would be beneficial to effectively identifying more gifted students. The participants shared that although standardized testing is usually an important factor in identifying gifted students, it should not be the most important factor, and that student work samples should be included as an indicator. Additionally, a positive student-teacher relationship was mentioned as being another very important factor in identifying gifted students in underrepresented gifted groups. The following 3 slides represents the findings of how the findings from the action research study connect to the peer-reviewed literature. The study's finding connected to teacher perception about identifying giftedness because both the Allen and the IABO studies conclude that there is an immediate need for teacher collaboration and professional development in order for teachers to effectively identify student giftedness. The results of this action study also implies that more gifted education professional development opportunities are needed to properly train teachers about identifying underrepresented gifted groups. Underrepresented gifted groups is that the research concludes that gifted identification procedures should include other factors than standardized testing when identifying giftedness in these underrepresented groups. The results of this action study also concludes that while standardized testing is an important factor, it should not be considered the most important factor when identifying underrepresented gifted students because of the cultural biasness exhibited in standardized testing. The last literature theme looks at the characteristics of underrepresented gifted students. The results of this study connect to the literature that concludes that underrepresented gifted students can feel conflicted about belonging to both gifted and urban cultures. Teachers in this action study identify the importance of establishing positive student-teacher relationships in order to not only effectively identify gifted students, but also to help underrepresented gifted students navigate and develop their own giftedness.